That critical voice in your head, the one that tells you you're not good enough, it isn't yours. It speaks with a borrowed authority, using words it didn't write to enforce rules you never agreed to. By the end of this, you'll know exactly whose voice it is, how it got a key to your mind, and why it stays. And the reason you can't silence it is because you're trying to argue with the recording. This is more than a metaphor. The feeling of being watched, judged, and found wanting by an internal presence is an almost universal human experience. You know the voice. It's the one that whispers, "Don't even try," when you think about a new project. It's the one that replays your social mistakes on a loop at 3 in the morning. It's the one that compares your life to everyone else's highlight reel and concludes you are hopelessly behind. You might think of it as your conscience, or your perfectionism, or just your own internal monologue. It's a ghost that haunts the space between your ears, and it's uncannily specific. It uses particular phrases: "You're being lazy," "That was a stupid thing to say," "Who do you even think you are?" It has a certain tone. Maybe it's sarcastic, or disappointed, or cold. Picture that voice right now. Hear its cadence. Chances are it sounds vaguely or even precisely like a real person. This is the first clue. That voice is a psychological inheritance. It's the result of a process psychologists call introjection, where we unconsciously adopt the attitudes, beliefs, and judgments of others, particularly influential figures from our early lives. A parent, a teacher, a coach, a sibling. Their words, repeated over and over, became a script your brain memorized and now performs for you, starring you as the perpetual disappointment. It's a program that was installed when you were too young to have a firewall, and it's been running in the background ever since. But why would your brain do this? Why would it let a voice that causes so much pain become a permanent resident? It feels like a fundamental design flaw. The reason is primitive. It's a survival mechanism that has been corrupted. Think of the inner critic as a bodyguard, hired long ago, that now uses deeply flawed methods to do its job. The job description was simple: keep you safe. For our ancestors, safety meant belonging to the tribe. Getting rejected, ostracized, or exiled was a death sentence. So the brain developed an internal early warning system, a pre-critic. Its function was to spot your flaws before anyone else did, so you could correct them and remain in good standing with the group. The people whose voices you internalized were likely trying to do the same thing in their own misguided way. The parent who said, "You need to work harder or you'll never amount to anything," probably thought they were motivating you, protecting you from a harsh world. The teacher who pointed out every tiny mistake believed they were teaching you discipline. They were giving you the tools to survive, and their criticism was one of those tools. Your young brain absorbed this logic completely. It concluded, criticism is protection, self-criticism is self-protection. So it built a bodyguard that sounds exactly like them, and that bodyguard's core strategy is to keep you safe by keeping you small. It operates on a simple, brutal logic. If you never take a risk, you can never fail spectacularly. If you never speak your mind, you can never be rejected for your beliefs. If you constantly remind yourself of your flaws, you'll never be surprised when someone else points them out. The critic's protection is a cage, a comfortable, familiar cage with padded walls, but a cage all the same. It protects you from the possibility of a bigger life by ensuring you never try to live one. This explains the motive, the broken why behind the voice. But what's the mechanism? How does a spoken word, an attitude, a feeling of disapproval become a permanent, physical fixture in your brain? The process is less like a memory and more like carving a canyon into your mind. Every thought you have is a pattern of neurons firing in your brain. There's a principle in neuroscience called Hebb's law. It's often simplified to this: neurons that fire together wire together. Imagine a grassy hill after a rainstorm. The first drops of water create a tiny, shallow path. With each new storm, more water flows down that same path, deepening it. Over years, that path becomes a groove, then a gully, then a canyon. Eventually, all water on that part of the hill is channeled into that one deep established route. It becomes the path of least resistance. A critical thought is like that rain. The first time an authority figure told you, "You're not smart enough," a specific network of neurons fired. It created a tiny path. The 10th time, the path got a little deeper. The 1000th time you heard it or repeated it to yourself, that network became a superhighway. That thought became your brain's default route. It is now more energy efficient for your brain to think "I'm not smart enough" than it is to blaze a new trail. The voice's authority comes from this repetition. It feels true because it's familiar. It feels powerful because its neural pathway is deep and wide. Its power is an illusion of engineering. It has seniority. It does not have accuracy. So when you try to think a new thought, "I am capable," you aren't just fighting a belief. You are physically trying to forge a new path through that grassy hill while a river rages through the canyon beside you. It takes conscious effort. It takes deliberate repetition. The old path won't vanish overnight. But the less you use it, the more overgrown it becomes. But if it's just a well-worn path, why does it feel so intelligent? Why does it know your exact weak spots and the precise words that will cut you the deepest? It knows the playbook because it was there when the playbook was written. The voice belongs to someone who was present during your formative years, when your core beliefs about yourself were being forged in the fire of experience. They saw what you were excited about. They saw what you were ashamed of. They saw what you were afraid of. And their words, whether intentionally or not, targeted those exact vulnerabilities. So the inner critic they left behind has a perfect high-resolution map of your insecurities, and it has a ruthlessly effective set of tactics. Its primary weapon is labeling. It takes a single action and makes it your identity. You didn't make a mistake, you are a mistake. You didn't do something foolish, you are a fool. This is a devastatingly effective way to create shame. Its second tactic is generalization. It takes one instance of failure and extrapolates it across your entire past and future. You always mess this up. You'll never figure it out. It uses absolute words to lock you into a narrative of permanent inadequacy. This is what makes it feel so hopeless, and finally, it projects failure. It fast-forwards to the worst-case scenario and presents it as a certainty. If you take that job, you're going to get fired. If you go to that party, you'll just stand in the corner alone. It's an oracle of your own demise. At this point, some will argue this is just an elaborate way to blame our parents or our past for our own negative thinking. It's a way to avoid taking responsibility. And that's a fair point to raise. But the goal here is diagnosis, not blame. You cannot fix a machine without understanding how it was built. You can't debug a software program without looking at the source code. Identifying the origin of the voice takes it from being an irrefutable internal truth about you and reframes it as a perspective from someone else, a learned opinion. And once you see it as an opinion, you can recognize that you have the authority to disagree. Recognizing the source isn't an abdication of responsibility. It's the first step in claiming true ownership of your mind. But this is the diagnostic phase. How do you begin the treatment? The typical advice to just think positive is like telling someone with a chronic illness to just feel better. It completely misses the nature of the problem. Trying to argue with the critic is a trap. Engaging it in a debate, presenting evidence of your worth, trying to drown it out with affirmations, all of this validates the voice as a real and powerful opponent. You are treating a recording as a live combatant. Every moment you spend fighting it, you are giving it exactly what it needs to thrive, your attention. The recording can't be reasoned with. It has a set playlist of insults and warnings, and it will just keep playing them. The solution is to disengage, to stop being a participant in the argument and become a neutral observer of the thought. The work is to change your relationship with the voice. First, you externalize it. Give the critic a name. It could be the actual person's name, or a descriptive title like the auditor, or even something ridiculous like Gremlin Gary. The moment you name it, you create separation. When the thought "I'm going to fail" arises, you can now say, "Ah, Gary's worried about the project again." This simple shift is profound. The thought is no longer you, it is the opinion of a third party that happens to be in your head. It is happening over there, not in me. Second, you can translate its message. Instead of hearing the words, listen for the flawed intention behind them. The critic is a terrible communicator. Its only language is fear and judgment, so you become its translator. When it screams, "Don't you dare apply for that promotion. You're not qualified," you translate it. The system is detecting a risk of rejection and is attempting to prevent potential emotional pain. It transforms a personal attack into a faulty weather report. You can acknowledge the report without believing the forecast. Noted, high chance of anxiety. I'll proceed anyway. Third, and most powerfully, you acknowledge and redirect. You simply notice the voice without judgment or engagement and gently return your focus to what you were doing. You're an idiot. You hear it and you let it go, like a car passing on the street, like a cloud moving across the sky. You don't argue with it, you don't analyze it, you simply register its presence. Ah, the idiot story again, and you let it pass. Every time you do this, you are refusing to pour water down that old canyon. You are letting the superhighway fall into disuse. You are choosing which path to water. The critic is also a master of disguise. It rarely shows up wearing a sign that says, "I am your irrational inner critic." It cloaks itself in concepts that sound wise and rational, making it harder to detect. One of its favorite costumes is realism. It will tell you, "I'm not being negative, I'm just being realistic." It frames your ambition as naivete and its own catastrophic predictions as sober judgment. It tells you that lowering your expectations is the only way to avoid disappointment. This brand of realism is a prison disguised as a sensible apartment. It's a statistical model based entirely on old fears, with no room for new data. Another favorite disguise is motivation. This is the voice of the inner drill sergeant. You're being lazy. You have to push harder, suffer now for success later. It sells you the idea that self-flagellation is a prerequisite for achievement. It convinces you that kindness to yourself is the same as complacency. It hijacks the language of discipline to justify its own abusive behavior. But true, sustainable motivation is pulled by purpose, not pushed by fear. And finally, it disguises itself as humility. This is the voice that polices your pride. Don't get a big head, don't brag about your success. Remember all the ways you're still not good enough. It frames any moment of self-satisfaction as arrogance. This keeps you from ever internalizing your accomplishments. It ensures that no matter what you achieve, your baseline feeling about yourself remains one of inadequacy. This isn't humility, it's manufactured shame. When a thought feels heavy, restrictive, and rooted in fear, you must learn to ask, is this genuine wisdom, or is it my critic in a clever costume? The ultimate goal is to demote the critic. It goes from being the unquestioned ruler of your internal world to a bitter, deposed advisor you no longer listen to. You may never silence it completely, but its voice can become faint. Its pronouncements, once felt as undeniable truths, will start to sound like what they are: tired, repetitive, and ultimately boring. One day, you will take a risk, speak your truth, or start a new chapter, and you will be halfway through before you realize you forgot to consult the critic first. Its approval will have become irrelevant. That voice was never your enemy. It was a broken tool. It was a faulty compass given to you by someone who was themselves lost, trying to guide you away from dangers that existed only on their map. You don't have to shadow the compass. You just have to thank it for its flawed service, set it aside, and learn to navigate by your own stars. And this same process of untangling internal narratives is the key to resolving imposter syndrome, which is simply your inner critic specializing in your career, using the same borrowed authority to try and convince you that you are, and always will be, a fraud.